Hello, everyone. Welcome back. It's a very sunny Thursday in my study. Cat's shouting at me. Socks is shouting at me from downstairs. I think he loses track of where I've got to. And he comes looking like that. Come on, Socks. Come on. I also think he thinks it's lunchtime, which it's not quite. I'm going to set this down here. Come on, come and sit with me. Now, an update. What's going on? I'm still reading time and again. Jack Finney, I'm over halfway through, and I'm spending kind of long, lazy times with this. It's a really interesting, slow novel. It's a novel about time travel, about going back from the hustle and bustle of present day New York, which in terms of this is 1970. A kind of enchanted time in itself now. But he goes back to, our hero goes back to the 1880s and gets embroiled in a kind of mystery and a romance back then. And he's obsessed with the details of New York then. The heights of the buildings, the fact that this particular church is the highest point he can see from, when in his own present time it's dwarfed by skyscrapers, of course. He's very into the details of the buses, the omnibuses, and the clothes, and the looks on people's faces. There's an interesting bit where he talks about people's faces are actually different. They're more alert and engaged back then. More miserable, but more happy too. I marked out a bit, I've got one of these little tabs, to do with the differences. But there's lots of snow in this as well, because it's set in the early part of the year and he travels back into snowy Central Park, and that's kind of magical for me too. This is when he goes back for the second time, and he takes his girlfriend Kate. He's not meant to, and she visits old New York with him too. I'd felt Kate's arm tighten under mine, drawing my arm closer to her side, and I understood why. This strange dim street, still clattering steel against cobble, in a blackness relieved by squares, rectangles, and cones of vague light, whose very colour was strange, had me uneasy too. And yet, oh God, just to be here. Something in me responded to it, and the mystery of the hurrying, dimly seen people around us, and I knew Rube Prian had been right. That was the man who inculcated him and brought him into this secret project. This was the greatest possible adventure. And it's made me think about time travel novels as a separate genre. Somebody said in recent years, and it might have been Russell T Davies, that time travel fiction didn't really exist until film did, and people could run strips of film backwards and forwards and move time. And I'm not sure if that's true. It sounds convincing. It sounds like the kind of thing that should be true. Certainly, H.G. Wells wrote The Time Machine after, come on, after film, and photography. So, if he's the first proper time travel novel, there must have been mystical ones, though, before that. Come on. Boop. And I'm thinking about other great time travel novels I know. Hello. And I'm thinking of Somewhere in Time. Well, is it Bid Time Return, I think the novel's called, and then they repackaged it as Somewhere in Time, Richard Matheson, which comes after this one, after Jack Finney, and shares a lot of aspects with it. It's a love story across the decades, but also it's something where time travel is accomplished through telepathy. Not telepathy, hypnosis. Somebody thinking themselves back through time and dressing up and being around things that come from the time they want to travel to. So they induce a state of mind which allows them to slip back through time. They share that in common. And it's a very seductive way of writing about time travel in a non-technological way. You need a time machine otherwise. You need the kind of strange bicycle device that the fella in the time machine has. Or in the Christopher Priest sequel to the time machine, it's a bed, isn't it, bouncing along on the surface of Mars. What other time travel would I recommend? Behold the Man by Michael Moorcock, which is a fairly, I think, kind of shocking in its ideas, in its bold presentation of the the myth of Jesus and the story of the crucifixion. There's one to read for Easter. Another one, Let's Go to Golgotha, is a short story by Gary Kilworth, also covering the crucifixion and time travellers going back to visit. Short stories often serve time travel narratives well. The classic Sound of Thunder, Ray Bradbury, about people, tourists again, going back to see dinosaurs and changing history by treading off the path. Tourists in time travel stories, quite a kind of rich area. There's the fantastic and really scary, as I remember, novel by Tim Powers, The Anubis Gates, which has this idea of time as a kind of sheet of ice over a flowing stream with holes in the ice, and you can drop through the hole and be borne backwards to pop out at an earlier point. And time travelers go back to the 18th century, and it's a well used hotspot, Soho, in the Victorian era, I think. And it becomes I think, a serial killer story, but there's some awful killer clown. That's how I remember it. I hope it is that. I'm saying it is. Anyway, so Tim Powers and the Anubis Gates is well worth looking for. I'm sure there's lots of other great time travel novels. The time tourist thing, the whole idea that at some point in the future it'll be possible to sign up and go on trips into the past, I think comes about with E.M. Forster and the Celestial Omnibus short story first, if that's accurate. I'm not sure. I seem to remember that's the case. And then up until recently, last Christmas, Stephen Moffat used that idea in the Time Hotel aspect of his Doctor Who Christmas special, Joy to the World. And there's a Doctor Who story that should be novelised by somebody. I'm not sure who. Stephen did his own novelisation of his 50th anniversary Doctor Who special, Time of the Doctor, and that kind of cleverly looked at time travel in the sense that when three doctors are in the same room, they can remember experiencing this scene decades or even centuries apart. And that's kind of fascinating when you think about it. And it allows for all kinds of plot twists, in that it means, I think, that he can work out a calculation using his sonic screwdriver, and it takes centuries to do, but of course it's present in the room the whole time. It's the theory of the long journey round, which Moffat uses quite a lot in his Doctor Who's. He did that in Joy to the World as well. You dip out of time, set something working, and come back at the moment you left. So I think that's my kind of top, whatever it is, 5, 6 time travel stories that I know of. I'm sure I'll think of many more. They're quite straightforward science fiction stories in some ways. We've had literary ones, or ones that wouldn't necessarily market themselves as science fiction. There was Time Traveller's Wife in recent years, which was a big hit, and owes something to Moffat or vice versa. I'm not sure. I know that he was involved in adapting it for TV. But the idea of people meeting each other out of sync through time is a very kind of attractive idea for fiction writers, I think. In some ways, I would class John Fowles as the French Lieutenant's Woman as a kind of time travel novel. It's metafiction, begins as a kind of pastiche of a 19th century novel, and then does strange things to its own status as kind of fake reality. We get a narrative point of view which comes from the 1960s and imposes itself on the 19th century. So it's a kind of time travel. I suppose in that analysis, every kind of novel writing is time travel, because you're buggering about in the fabric of minute by minute progression of time and events. Last night we watched The Flash, a DC movie, which is all about time travel, with a wonderful scene that has Michael Keaton's Batman dump a whole load of spaghetti in the middle of the table and say, that's the multiverse, that's how time travel works, which is the best answer I've heard for a long time. I didn't expect this to be all about time travel, but it seems to be. I shall go off and think about other examples, and if you've got any other good examples of good time travel novels, do let me know. Yeah, I shall dwell on that a bit. It's not something I think I've written about directly, apart from people travelling into the past, going there and having some kind of adventure. I don't think I've looked at the ramifications of time travel in things that I've written. I don't think. Anyway, I'll stop there today. And I know what it was. Ask me questions. I've had a few questions asking me about different stuff, and it would be easier just to answer them on here. And I did this last year, and I got loads of good questions in the comments. So do leave comments below with any questions you've got about writing, about my videos on here, about reading, about my work in progress, the memoir that I've been reading bits of, anything else you can think of. I can't promise to answer everything, but I will have a go. Okay, Socks is asleep now after all that shouting. I'll see you again quite soon. Goodbye.